When a firefighter hears a desperate cry in the freezing night, he discovers a tiny life left behind, setting off a journey that changes everything. Hi everyone, welcome to Life Flow, where every story brings a new perspective. Let's get started. Jack Reynolds had never been one to shy away from the hard calls. As a firefighter, he was used to facing danger head-on, running into burning buildings to save those trapped inside. But one bitterly cold December night, he responded to a call that would change his life forever. Not because of flames, but because of a tiny life left behind in the cold. That night, the station's radio crackled to life with a report of faint cries coming from an old, abandoned building on the industrial district. The dispatcher sounded uneasy, mentioning that the call had come from a woman, her voice shaking, barely more than a whisper, before she hung up. Jack and his partner, Ray, arrived expecting the worst, maybe squatters or a transit needing help. But as they stepped out of the fire truck into the biting cold, Jack heard something that froze him in place. A soft, desperate cry carried on the icy wind. He turned to the building, its darkened windows like hollow eyes staring back at him. They moved quickly inside, the old floors creaking beneath their boots as they followed the sound. In the dim light of his flashlight, Jack saw a small bundle nestled in a corner, wrapped in a thick, worn blanket. The baby's cries were weak, its tiny face pinched with cold, but Jack could see that someone had tried to keep the child warm. He knelt down, his breath misting into frigid air, and gently lifted the baby into his arms. The child's cheeks were flushed red from the cold, but its breaths were slow and labored, each one a struggle against the freezing night. "Ray, call it in. Get an ambulance here now." Jack's voice rang out, urgent. He wrapped his coat tightly around the baby, trying to share his body heat, whispering softly as he held the child close. "Hang in there, little one. Help is coming." He couldn't fathom who would leave a baby here, but he noticed that the blanket was tucked securely, almost tenderly, around the child, as if whoever had left him had cared deeply. Unbeknownst to Jack, hidden in the shadows of a nearby alley, the woman who had made the call watched, her breath clouding in the cold air. She clutched her arms around herself, fighting the urge to rush forward, her heart breaking as she saw the firefighter cradle her child. Tears streamed down her face, but she stayed rooted in place, knowing she couldn't be the mother this baby needed. When she saw the flashing lights of the ambulance arrive, she slipped away into the night, disappearing from view, leaving only questions behind. Jack rode with the paramedics to the hospital, refusing to leave the baby's side. As they worked to stabilize the child's temperature, he stayed close, murmuring words of encouragement to the small, shivering bundle in his arms. He couldn't understand why the mother had abandoned her child, but he felt a sense of urgency to protect this tiny life, to make sure it got a second chance. At the hospital, the pediatric team took over, wrapping the baby in warm blankets and carefully checking his vitals. Jack stood nearby, unable to leave the sight of the child, even as doctors and nurses moved around them. They placed the baby on a heated bed, monitoring his heartbeat and breathing, their expressions focused but not panicked. After a thorough examination, a nurse approached Jack, her face showing a mixture of relief and concern. "The baby's stable. He's not in immediate danger, but he's underweight and showing signs of malnutrition. It looks like he hasn't been fed properly for a while, but we'll get him what he needs." She offered a small, weary smile. "He's a fighter, though. I think he'll make it." Jack nodded, feeling a weight lift slightly from his chest. He stayed at the hospital for hours, watching through the observation window as the nurses cared for the infant. The baby was so small, hooked up to wires and tubes, yet he felt an unexplainable connection, a desire to make sure the child survived and thrived. Before he left, he wrote a name on the visitor's log, something that felt right: Noah. It was a small thing, but it gave the boy a sense of identity, a sign that he mattered. Days turned into weeks, and Jack kept returning to the hospital, visiting Noah whenever he could. The nurses started to call him the fireman guardian, and Jack didn't mind. He watched as Noah grew stronger, his tiny body filling out, the color returning to his cheeks. But eventually, social services took over the case, and they found Noah a home with a couple named Hannah and Mark, two people who had been waiting for years to adopt. Jack met them briefly before they took Noah home. He saw the love in their eyes as they held the boy he had named, the way they promised to cherish him forever. Yet, as happy as he was for Noah, Jack couldn't shake the lingering emptiness that settled in his chest. He returned to his life as a firefighter, facing new emergencies every week, but the memory of that freezing night and the fragile life he'd saved wouldn't leave him. One rainy evening, Jack received a letter at the firehouse. It was from Hannah and Mark, accompanied by a photo of Noah, now a bright-eyed toddler bundled up in a cozy jacket, smiling into the camera. The letter was full of gratitude, inviting Jack to visit them whenever he wanted. But Jack hesitated. It had been nearly 3 years, and he wasn't sure he could face those old emotions again. Meanwhile, as Noah grew up in a home filled with love, he began to ask questions. He wondered where he came from, why he had been left behind, and what had happened to the mother he had never known. When he was old enough to understand, Hannah and Mark told him about Jack, the firefighter who had saved him, and Noah became determined to meet the man who had given him a chance at life. One autumn day, Hannah reached out to Jack, inviting him to dinner. Jack accepted, knowing he couldn't avoid his connection to Noah forever. When he arrived, he found Noah waiting on the front porch, with the same determined expression Jack had seen in the neonatal unit years ago. After an awkward dinner filled with polite conversation, Noah finally asked the question that had been burning inside him. "Do you think it's possible to find her? My real mom, I just want to know why she left me." Jack had expected the question, but it still felt like a blow. He saw the longing in Noah's eyes, the need for answers. Taking a deep breath, Jack nodded. "I don't know if we'll find her, but I'll try. We'll try together." Jack spent weeks combing through old records, digging into police reports and social service files from the night Noah was abandoned. The breakthrough came when they uncovered a forgotten report mentioning a young woman seen near the abandoned building, her eyes hollow with grief. Her name was Anna Foster. Digging deeper, they found hospital records showing that Anna had given birth just days before the baby was found. This crucial detail allowed them to verify her identity as Noah's mother. With this new information, Jack and Noah traced Anna's last known location to a small town near the Oregon coast, bringing them closer to the truth about Noah's past. Armed with this information, Jack and Noah tracked Anna to a small town near the coast. They arrived at a rundown trailer park, following a tip from a local volunteer who remembered Anna Foster. Jack and Noah pulled up to a faded green trailer. The place had seen better days, a far cry from the cozy home Noah grew up in, tightening the knot in his stomach. Jack cut the engine, turning to Noah. "You sure you want to do this?" he asked quietly. Noah took a deep breath, clenching his fists. "Yeah, I have to know why," he replied, voice barely a whisper. As they approached the trailer, each step echoed in the silence. Jack knocked, and after a moment, the door creaked open. Anna stood there, her hair streaked with gray, eyes shadowed by years of regret. For a moment, she didn't recognize them. Then her gaze locked onto Noah. Her breath caught, and she clutched the doorframe. Jack broke the silence, his voice careful. "Anna Foster? My name is Jack Reynolds, and this is Noah." He hesitated, glancing at Noah, who stood frozen, eyes locked on the woman before him. "We think you might be his mother." The words seemed to hang in the air, mingling with the rain. Anna's hand flew to her mouth, and for a heartbeat, she seemed ready to shut the door, to run from the truth she had been avoiding for so many years. But then, she looked back at Noah, really seeing him for the first time. The same green eyes she had seen in the mirror, the curve of his chin that mirrored her own. She swallowed hard, her voice trembling. "Come in, please," she said, stepping back to let them inside. Her hands shook as she closed the door behind them, and the old lock clicked shut, sounding like a final, heavy decision. Anna motioned for them to sit on a worn couch, but she remained standing, wringing her hands together as if trying to find the right words. Noah lowered himself onto the couch slowly, feeling the weight of all the years without answers pressing down on him. He looked up at Anna, searching her face for any sign of familiarity, but all he saw was a woman haunted by something he couldn't yet understand. Finally, It was Anna who broke the silence, her voice barely a whisper, as if speaking these words could shatter her. "I knew this day would come," she said, her eyes red-rimmed and glistening with unshed tears. I didn't think I'd ever have the courage to face you again." Noah swallowed hard, forcing the words out. "Why did you leave me?" he asked, his voice raw. "Why did you put me there alone? What did I do wrong?" Anna flinched as if the words had struck her, a deep sob catching in her chest. She took a shaky breath and forced herself to look him in the eye. "It wasn't you, Noah. You didn't do anything wrong. I thought I was giving you a chance I couldn't give you myself." She sank down onto a rickety chair, her hands gripping her knees, and her voice cracked as she continued. "Your father passed away months before I gave birth. After he was gone, I couldn't keep up with the rent. We lost the house, and I tried everything, shelters, churches, but they were all full. I had nowhere to go, and I was terrified. You deserved so much more than I could give you. I thought that if I left you somewhere safe, someone stronger, someone better, would find you and give you a chance that I couldn't." Noah's breath hitched, the pain in his chest twisting as he listened. It wasn't the explanation he had imagined, but it was filled with a kind of broken truth. He could hear the desperation in her voice, the way she clung to the memory of that decision, as if it were the only thing keeping her from falling apart. "You didn't even stay," he said, his voice cracking, the hurt spilling over. "You called the fire department, but you didn't stay. You just left me there. Do you know how that feels?" Anna's shoulders shook, and she buried her face in her hands. "I did stay, Noah. I stayed until I saw them take you. I watched the firemen, Jack, pick you up, hold you like you were precious. I saw him carry you away, and I knew you would be safe. But I was too much of a coward to step forward, to ask for help. I thought you'd be better off without me." Jack shifted uncomfortably, watching the scene unfold, but knowing this was not his moment to intervene. He saw the way Noah's hands shook, the tears glistening in the young man's eyes as he wrestled with the storm of emotions inside him. "Why didn't you come back?" Noah pressed, his voice rising with desperation. "Why didn't you try to find me later, when things got better?" Anna shook her head, her voice barely more than a whisper. "I was scared. I convinced myself you'd be adopted by a family that could give you everything I couldn't. And I thought, after so many years, it was too late. What right did I have to come back into your life? After I'd left you like that?" Noah stood up abruptly, pacing across the cramped living room, his mind spinning with the weight of her words. He had imagined this moment so many times, rehearsed it in his head, picturing every possible reason she could have given. But the reality of it, the raw pain in her voice, was so much more complicated than he had prepared for. He turned back to her, his face flushed with a mixture of anger and heartbreak. "Do you know how many nights I lay awake, wondering why I wasn't enough for you to stay? I thought you just didn't care." Anna choked back a sob, reaching out as if to touch him, but pulled back. "I cared, Noah. I cared so much it broke me, but I thought you'd hate me if you knew the truth. I'm so sorry. I know it doesn't make it right, but I wanted you to have a better life." For a long moment, Noah stood there, staring at the woman who had haunted his dreams. He felt like he was standing on a cliff, unsure if he should hold on to his anger or try to understand. Anna reached into a drawer and pulled out a small, worn stuffed bear with a frayed ribbon around its neck. "I kept this. It's all I have left from when you were born." Noah hesitated, then took the bear from her. He studied it, trying to imagine the life he never knew. A lump formed in his throat as he traced the faded ribbon. He thought about the nights he wondered about his mother, picturing 1,000 different faces, but never this one. Anna watched him with a mixture of hope and trepidation, as if this moment could break her all over again. "I carried it with me through everything, even when I tried to forget," she said, her voice barely more than a whisper. "It was the only way I could hold on to you. I know it's too little too late, but I hope it means something." Noah's grip on the bear tightened, and he felt a wave of conflicting emotions wash over him. Anger, sadness, and a glimmer of something he couldn't quite name. "It doesn't make up for everything," he said slowly, his voice rough with emotion. "But maybe it's a start." Anna's face crumpled, tears streaming down her cheeks. She nodded, her voice breaking. "I don't expect your forgiveness, Noah. I never did. But thank you for letting me tell you, for letting me see you one more time." Noah's gaze softened, his anger ebbing slightly, leaving behind a deep, aching sadness. "I'm not sure where we go from here," he said quietly, his eyes meeting hers for a moment that felt like an eternity. "But I'm glad I came." Anna reached out tentatively, as if to touch his arm, but pulled back, afraid to cross a boundary she didn't fully understand. "I'll never stop being sorry, Noah, but I'll always be grateful that you made it, that you found a life." As they left the trailer, stepping back into the cold rain, Noah clutched the stuffed bear, feeling its fragile weight. He wasn't sure what the future held, but for the first time, he had a piece of the past he never knew. Jack walked beside him, offering quiet support, letting Noah process the encounter. Back in the truck, they sat in silence, listening to the rain on the roof. Noah finally spoke, his voice rough but steady. "I don't know if I can forgive her, Jack, but I think I can try to understand." Jack nodded, eyes on the road. "You don't have to forgive her all at once, Noah. That kind of courage takes time." Noah turned the bear over in his hands, studying the faded ribbon. "Maybe. I think I need time to figure out what it all means. But I'm glad you were with me. I couldn't have done it alone." Jack smiled faintly. "You're not alone, Noah, and you never will be. No matter what happens next, you've got a whole future ahead of you." They drove back through the rain, the sun breaking through the clouds, casting streaks of gold on the wet pavement. Jack glanced at Noah and saw a quiet determination in his expression, a resolve to keep moving forward. In the end, they couldn't change the past, but they could choose their path forward. For the first time, Noah felt like he had a chance to shape his own story. No longer just the boy who was found, but the young man ready to rise above his past. As the rain let up and the sun broke through, it felt like the start of something new, a future where he could finally leave the shadows behind.